The night my biological father erased me from his life, I was 27. He stood in the center of his pristine, white-carpeted living room, his face twisted with a cold, corporate fury. Pointing a finger at the tiny, non-verbal 5-year-old boy holding my hand, he gave me an ultimatum that changed everything. He told me that by choosing a broken stranger over my own flesh and blood, I was throwing my entire future away. With a chilling calmness, he slid a thick folder across the mahogany table like an executive firing an incompetent employee. Inside were the cancellation notices for every financial account he had ever helped me establish, along with a legal revocation of every family promise. He told me I was completely unstable and incapable of survival, warning me never to come crawling back when that damaged child inevitably ruined my life. I did not scream or beg for his mercy. I simply gathered the adoption paperwork, squeezed the little boy's trembling fingers, and walked out into the cool night air while my father continued to shout insults at our backs. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, my phone was buzzing relentlessly with over 30 missed calls from him. I ignored every single one of them, refusing to let his voice back into my head. At exactly 8 o'clock that morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb outside my apartment building. A sharply dressed man in a tailored suit stepped out, flanked by 2 large security guards who looked intensely serious. The man held a photograph of the little boy sleeping on my living room floor, his hands shaking noticeably as he asked if I was the woman who had rescued his son. The little boy's name was Caleb Vance, and for months, the foster care system had treated his profound silence as a defect rather than a language. He didn't speak a word, but he communicated through a series of subtle movements that only I seemed to notice. He would tap twice on my wrist when a stranger got too close, or meticulously fold the corner of his napkin when he was trying to hold back tears. I first met Caleb at a chaotic emergency shelter where I was dropping off donations from the local bookstore I managed. He was sitting alone in a corner, clutching a worn-out stuffed animal with his hospital intake band still fastened to his tiny wrist. The social worker told me his mother had passed away suddenly, leaving behind incomplete records and absolutely no mention of any biological father or extended family. When I walked out of the shelter that afternoon, Caleb pressed his small hand against the glass door, watching me with a look of pure heartbreak. I could not forget that expression, so I immediately applied to become his emergency foster placement, eventually fighting for permanent adoption when no one else stepped forward. My father, Marcus Vance, discovered the truth just 2 days before our final court hearing. Marcus owned a prestigious crisis management firm and viewed personal reputation as more valuable than oxygen. A single daughter adopting a traumatized, non-verbal child did not fit into his carefully crafted public image of a successful American family. He initially tried to shame me into submission, then offered me money to walk away, and finally resorted to vicious legal threats to stop the adoption. When none of his manipulation worked, he cornered me in the courthouse parking lot, swearing he would make me understand the true cost of embarrassing him. I falsely assumed that being disowned was the absolute worst thing he could do to me, but I was entirely wrong. The real nightmare began the very next afternoon during Caleb's first official developmental assessment at a local pediatric clinic. The moment the receptionist read my name on the intake sheet, the color completely drained from her face. A clinic supervisor quickly escorted me into a private office and revealed that an anonymous tipster had reported me for being mentally unstable and financially fraudulent. My stomach sank because I instantly recognized the specific buzzwords my father used to destroy anyone who dared to disobey his commands. I spent 2 grueling hours defending my character to a social worker while Caleb sat quietly on the floor, building towers out of wooden blocks and knocking them down whenever a door slammed. The clinic eventually cleared us of any wrongdoing, but the official investigation had already been opened based entirely on a lie. That same night, Marcus demanded my presence at his house, offering to fix the situation if I surrendered the boy. When I refused his disgusting bargain, he officially cast me out of the family, leading me straight to the next morning when the mysterious black SUV arrived. The wealthy stranger standing at my door introduced himself as Harrison Whitmore, a name I recognized instantly from the philanthropic plaques hanging in every hospital in the state. Harrison's hands trembled violently as he showed me an old photo of Caleb laughing on his shoulders. Harrison explained through thick tears that Caleb's mother had vanished with the boy years ago following a bitter, exhausting custody battle. He had spent a fortune on private investigators for 2 years, only to receive a tip the previous night regarding a clinic report filed under my name. I instinctively stepped backward, completely blocking the doorway to protect the little boy sleeping peacefully in the next room. I told Harrison fiercely that he wasn't going to take Caleb away from me, but the wealthy man didn't react with anger. Instead, he looked completely devastated, assuring me that he had no intention of separating his son from the only person who had actually kept him safe. Just as he spoke, my phone began to ring again with my father's name flashing across the screen, causing Harrison's expression to harden instantly. Harrison asked me if Marcus Vance was my father, and when I nodded silently, a look of profound realization washed over his face. He revealed that he and Marcus were deeply entangled in a multi-million-dollar corporate partnership for a new children's charity initiative. It became immediately clear that Marcus had discovered Caleb's true identity long before I did, and he was trying to control the narrative for profit. The corporate clinic report had not been anonymous at all. Harrison's attorney quickly discovered that the callback number belonged directly to Marcus's private office line. My father hadn't disowned me out of concern for my financial well-being. He had cast me out because I wouldn't surrender a child who represented a massive financial payday for his firm. He wanted to hand Caleb to Harrison himself to secure the contract. By that afternoon, Marcus began sending a barrage of increasingly unhinged text messages, threatening to expose me as a predatory fraud if I didn't cooperate. He managed to force the adoption agency into holding an emergency review of my custody status, threatening to tear Caleb away from the only safe home he had ever known. Caleb felt the immense stress radiating through the apartment, his anxiety spiking with every notification sound. The little boy brought me his drawing pad, showing me a picture of a massive, dark figure drawn outside a bright red door with the word "loud" scribbled underneath. My throat tightened as I realized Caleb had witnessed Marcus's aggressive behavior during our parking lot confrontation days prior. Marcus didn't need to physically harm Caleb to traumatize him. His sheer arrogance and loud voice were terrifying enough to a vulnerable child. The emergency custody review took place 48 hours later in a cold, sterile agency conference room. Marcus arrived early, wearing a flawless custom suit and speaking to the social workers with the practiced warmth of a grieving patriarch. He put on a masterclass in manipulation, spinning a tragic web about his daughter's severe impulsivity and emotional instability to convince the board to revoke my adoption. The entire performance collapsed the moment Harrison Whitmore walked through the door with a team of high-powered attorneys. Harrison looked directly at my father and calmly stated that he was here to discuss the fraudulent reports Marcus had been making about his son. For the first time in my entire life, I watched my father completely lose his voice as his elaborate corporate scam fell apart. Marcus tried to recover by claiming he had no idea the boy was a Whitmore, spinning a new lie about how he was simply protecting me from financial ruin. I immediately countered his claim by sliding my own financial folders across the table, proving I had funded Caleb's life entirely through extra bookstore shifts. When the supervisor asked Caleb who he felt safe with, the little boy tapped his communication tablet, which clearly stated that home was with me. The adoption supervisor immediately dismissed the fraudulent complaint, prompting Marcus to corner me in the hallway out of view of the board members. He grabbed my arm with a terrifying grip, hissing about how much money my pathetic defiance had just cost his firm. That single sentence exposed his entire soul. He didn't care about family, or safety, or truth. He only cared about his corporate bottom line. That evening, Harrison officially terminated all business negotiations with Marcus's firm, blacklisting his company from every major philanthropic network in the country. Within 48 hours, the story of Marcus's live microphone meltdown and corporate fraud leaked to the local business journals. The word unstable, which he had weaponized against me for over a decade, was now permanently attached to his own reputation and career. By the end of the week, Marcus was forced to resign from his own executive board as his wealthy clients pulled their funding in droves. He called my phone dozens of times, leaving pathetic rambling voicemails begging me to fix the damage I had caused to his life. I listened to his desperate pleas but heard absolutely no remorse for the innocent child he had weaponized in the name of corporate greed. 3 months later, Harrison and I established a joint guardianship agreement that allowed Caleb to stay in his stable home with me while slowly building a relationship with his father. We opened a beautiful community-funded support center for nonverbal children, creating a sanctuary where no child would ever have to earn their dignity. My father thought he was destroying my life by casting me out, but he actually freed me to build a real family.